Good morning. My name is Chris Caius. I'm chairman of the Administration Committee for Kane County, and I'm calling this meeting to order Wednesday, May 11th, 2022 at 10 a.m. Can I have a roll call, please?
Martin.
Present.
Berman.
Berman's here.
Davis.
Davis here.
Ford.
Ford present.
Here.
Gums.
Gums here.
Hurog. Chepro. Yes.
Caius present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, a quorum. May I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from April 13th, 2022 and April 20th, 2022 by
Berman moved.
Berman, second.
Davis second.
Davis. Are there any changes or modifications or additions? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Davis.
Davis, yes.
Ford.
Ford, yes.
Bros.
Yes.
Gums.
Gums, yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes.
Yes.
Motion passes. We have I don't have here from finance, finance reports. The financial reports are attached. Is there any public comment? Anyone online? We don't have anybody listed. So no public comment. Facilities management. Our executive director's report, Mr. Roger Fonstock. Lead on, Mr. Fonstock.
All right, Blair, we got the presentation portion. It's fine. Good morning, this is Roger Fonstock, Executive Director for Building Management in the IT Department. So we have a report for you today. We're going to take you through a couple of different items. So I had the budget performance reports. I'm going to try to bring those on a regular basis just so you have an idea of where we're at financially with building management. We may actually incorporate IT reports as well so we can just kind of make it uniform. But for now, because we're new to building management, we're trying to give you an idea where we're at financially. Maintenance, budget challenges, similar to last month, where we're at percentage-wise as opposed to the percent of the year. Staffing and hiring challenges. And then we have some action items that we're going to go through. And then finally, just a quick discussion about the demolition of buildings and where we're at with some of that. We also have Jason Dwyer from White and Company, who's going to be talking about the planning and assessment reports. So we're going to try to get through our presentation and get through Jason, then we'll get to the resolution. So that's the order of the day, I think. This is the budget report for building management. This is a budget performance report. So we're at 5 months, 41% of the fiscal year. And you can see down the right-hand side, I tried to highlight it in kind of a red color. There's a few line items that are exceeding what was budgeted. Some of them are due to timing of the fiscal year. I don't think there's anything too terribly alarming in those. As you draw down to the end of the right-hand side, you'll see you're at 41% of the year, 33% spent for the year, which indicates that you're under budget at this point in time in the year. That could be because of timing. Some things happen early in the year, some things happen late. But at this point, I don't know that there's anything that I would necessarily throw up a red flag. The personnel services and salary and wages is a large component of the budget. If you look at the bottom middle, there's highlights. You get 36% of the personnel services for the year and 41% of the year done. That's on a relatively large amount of money for wages. So that makes the averages lower because we're underspending on personnel. We don't have a full complement of people working in the department right now because we have vacancies. Contractual, some buildings are over, some are under, average is 33%. Again, some of that's timing. We have some repairs that are done early, some done later in the year. Sometimes it's not predictable because they're reactionary types of things. Commodities are also a similar issue, but they're stable. All of those under 41%. So 33% of the $6 million budget, has been spent to date. 4,103,000 remaining, 8% under budget, which overall for 2022, if you had a even, expenditures over the year, you're under $486,000. So for personnel alone, you're 5% under as well. So, which is good, but at the same time, I would equate spending money to getting work done. And so those work and correlate directly, right? You spend more work, get more work done, spend less money, get less work done, maybe, I don't know. So, in terms of capital, same type of thing. We're way under expended on capital. A lot of the capital projects were deferred during kind of I call it the interruption of service or the disruption that we had in administrative leave and some of the other things that were going on. We're trying to pick back up on capital projects, but you'll see in there that we have considerable amount of money left in capital. There's a column to the right that shows you the 15%. And then this number in here is the budget less year-to-date expenses. So you budgeted 6.5 million and you have 5.5 million remaining in the capital budget. And we'll explain a little bit about that in the next couple slides about capital program initiation and what was in the capital budget, and then how we want to handle some of those things with capital program initiation. So if you look at anybody have any questions about the finances at this time? I guess I'll stop there for just a second. I think the overall message is good.
Gums, I have a quick question.
Madam Gums?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, with our expenditures going forward, the cost of goods is going to be going up. So I just want that. I mean, that's going to be a huge issue, right?
Well, we kind of have yet to see, the direct impact overall, but I would say, planning for 8% would probably be conservative. And okay. I've seen things that are even higher than that, depending on what you're buying and what the costs are. We saw some interesting, fee increases. We'll talk about it when we get to the waste management, refuse and recycling. We do have a contract for that came back in, and those numbers are all coming in higher for the renewal. And then, we did work with Jody Walnick, Director of the Energy and Environment, and we looked at the gas contracts, and those were considerably higher for just the actual gas charges. So some of those that have already come back have been considerably higher. So yes, you're right. And we are in that time right now where we're doing budget entry. And so myself and our team, Charles is here, we're going to be trying to determine what we think is a fair estimate for those. But I would anticipate for next fiscal year that we'll be asking for an increase. And then the remainder of this year, if we start expending money and the inflation continues, we might see some problems as we approach the end of the year. One of the things that Finance Director Onzik works with us on is trying to determine when we need to talk about budget adjustments and trying to work towards the end of the year with the money that we have in the fiscal budget and not coming in, prematurely to ask for money and then come to the end of the year and still be under. So we try to balance a little bit later in the year so we get a better, more accurate number. And we're not doing it multiple times every time something comes up when we still have funds available. So that's kind of where we're at. But yes, Ms. Gums, that's absolutely true.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
So the maintenance progress, we've been reviewing preventative maintenance and reactive maintenance. I've been looking at this with staff and with some outside resources. And when I talk about preventative maintenance, that's the things that you're scheduled to do, to change filters, to change belts, to handle the equipment day to day, make sure that it's in good working order. We just had the startup of the chillers and air conditioning. I think we had a relatively good startup of everything this week. We have a few spots that are warmer than they should be. I think even one or two that are too cold. So, but preventative maintenance is how do you take care of all the equipment? And that's something that we want to get better documentation and a better policy procedure and details on. And we're still early in that. Reactive maintenance is the service desk, people calling in, asking for help. They have particular problems and we're just reacting to fix it. So those are two areas that we're looking at. Again, I've been meeting with contractors and discussing solutions and services. Solutions meaning like software that we use to track the schedules, software that we use to track the service tickets. And then the other part is the service side of it is, do we have outside contractual services doing preventative maintenance on major mechanical? Do we have someone going through and inventorying all of our major mechanical and creating the preventative maintenance schedules based on the manufacturer's recommendations? And we're looking at proposals for that, whether we do it in-house or we do it through a contractual service, we need to do it. And I don't know that they're contractual or if there's actual preventative maintenance schedules for every major mechanical. That's a discussion we'll have at the end of this slide, which is how do we define critical systems for contractual PM?
Excuse me, Mr. Caius. Can
Yes.
I just make a comment?
Madam
please?
Chair.
Roger, are you sharing with us that there has not been historically a schedule?
I'm
for-
sorry, I don't interrupt. Can make sure that you get
Oh, is
talk
that,
right in the
that-
microphone.
are you sharing with us that there has not been a historic schedule on the maintenance of the mechanicals for the buildings of Kane County?
I would say that it is hit or miss kind of thing. There are some major mechanicals that they have, documented maintenance schedules for, and then some that we don't have really good records of what's been done or what, the other part of preventative maintenance is not just saying you have a schedule and that schedule's executed, it's quality control. Who goes and verifies that the staff that was supposed to do it did it and reviews it? So there's some follow-up and some other things. And, whether that is something that's an oversight or if it's just programmatically, we need to have someone do the review. So you talk to the maintenance staff, you say changed all the filters on the air handlers or air units. Okay, well, did the supervisor go by and check the work with somebody, just spot checking things to make sure that what they say is done is done? And I know that from dealing with some of the water filters, water heaters, temperatures, there's times when things are reported and closed, but not necessarily completed or done, so you're like, to what degree is it done? But yeah, I think the preventative maintenance schedules need some significant work, and we need to define what types of major mechanical require contractual PM, because we don't have the staff to handle or manage the system. And so, you can have someone from staff looking at something and find that they're not equipped or trained to work on it. And then they immediately refer to a contractual service. We're just saying in the preventative maintenance side of it, it would be good if maybe the certain dollar value of equipment has contracted PMs. So if it's over $30,000 piece of equipment, maybe we need to have a contracted PM done on it at its regular scheduled interval.
And one more question, please.
Okay.
When the staff goes out, the workers go out and do the maintenance, and you want to ensure that that maintenance has appropriately been done, can we put cameras on there? Is there a way electronically to make, just to document it so that it's a little easier? And I'm not being invasive or big brother, but just so that the workflow is a little easier.
There is a system for doing the facilities management and the PMs. And we actually have a system that's there for doing the scheduling. It's there. I don't know that it's fully populated with all of the information that's needed. And then the second part is, is it executed and followed up on? So, some of that is staffing. Some of it is, just I would call it mentoring or minding the information system. If you look at some of the facilities management systems, they're very comprehensive. The one we have can do exponentially more than what we use it for. So, and then it's okay, is it because we don't have the people managing the system? So the system's supposed to keep track of all of this, but if we don't have the right people, putting the data in, updating it regularly, doing the verification of things, and it can be daunting. I mean, it's a lot of data. You have a million square foot of buildings, 30 buildings. Each one has all these systems in them. So you have, checklists for each piece of equipment that somebody has to go through.
And that I can
Yeah.
appreciate, but we have seen what the cost is to the
It's
county for
steep.
lack of maintenance. And
Oh.
if we don't proceed with
Yeah.
regularly scheduled maintenance and having it documented, we'll continue to lose money for our taxpayers.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the quality control part of it is really important. It's not
Agreed.
just that you have a
Agreed.
maintenance schedule, it's to somebody go verify, that it was done. And then also that outside professional. So we have some boilers and chillers that require some high competent skills to operate. And there's some basic things that our people can do, but they certainly need attention of somebody who's trained on the specific equipment.
Mhm.
So making sure that we're not missing those. Who makes sure that we're not missing those? Those kinds of questions, So we're working through that. I think that's going to be a big topic for how we handle some of the stuff later with the reorganization or contractual services.
Mr. Davis, did you have a question or comment?
Question or comment, Davis here. And I think you've referred to it already, Roger. You mentioned preventive maintenance and then also like a service desk, repair tickets or that kind of thing. I assume that the systems would mesh so that we can use not just the
Yes.
preventive maintenance records, but if we're getting service ticket requests,
Yes.
that you marry the two and you start to see a trend, and it might even affect what kind of equipment we choose in the future. It's like, even though we're doing maintenance on it, we still have, we're now seeing a pattern of breakdowns in a particular area or type of equipment. And that,
Yes.
so
that's that's a very close comparison to how we handle stuff with IT equipment. We do the same thing. We document service tickets and we actually follow up on them. I think some of the detail of, reporting on what's happening in the service desk. Other thing would be getting the end users and offices and departments to use it properly, and then the staff to close and document the tickets properly. So if you have somebody that goes and deals with the same problem 4 or 5 times and the issue is closed without notation of what they did, and then the next person comes along and tries to figure out the same problem without the notation, they spend another hour looking at it because they have to figure out what happened. And we found a lot of the information in the service desk is closed with no notes. So that's a troubling spot, but there's a lot of things that don't make it into the service desk, which we want to change because you're not really tracking all of the work that's being done. People will talk to somebody, pass somebody in the hall, they pass something off. And we want to try and work similar to what we do in IT, where we have multiple ways to get a service request in. Right now, it's kind of limited to, you have to log into the facility management service desk, put in your ticket and put all the drop downs and fill out all the blanks. In IT, it's different. We have it, you can call, you can email, you can, if you pass one of our people and you ask them for something, they're supposed to put it in the help desk to document that you asked for it. And even myself, if you tell me something, I am not carrying that around with me all day. I send it to the help desk after you tell me.
Roger, if I use my laptop like a clipboard to handwrite things, I'm not doing it right?
You can. You just have to get it to one of us. Anyway, those types of reports, though, are useless if you don't have some content to them. And the aging reports, how long does someone wait for a service ticket to be addressed? Frequency and volume, which Mr. Davis was mentioning. How many times is this thing broke down? What did we do to it? Do we have particular departments, offices, or buildings that have frequency and volume of problems with the same piece of equipment? And if you're looking at the reports in the detail, you'll find that. So the next part is defining critical systems that require PM schedules, whether they're staff or contractual. And we're looking at how do you define those? Obviously, heating, air conditioning, boilers, those types of pieces of equipment, roof inspection. We have elevators, other major mechanical systems, but at some point we need to define what has to have a clearly defined PM schedule. We can't do clearly defined PM for maybe everything, but that might even include safety inspections, walkthroughs. I know, again, water resources and energy and environment, Jody Walnick, they're working on a hydrant and some issues with water at the Judicial Center. And they'll tell you that, over time, not doing certain types of maintenance preventative schedules on those have resulted in problems. So we need to do some, annual or regular inspection, basically making, our recommendations for repairs more regularly, waiting 5 years and then trying to fix it when it's dysfunctional is difficult. So just getting more frequency. So these are the challenges. Again, overall, I think the maintenance budgets, which is contractual, is not in bad shape. You're at like 32%. You have 7 months remaining. So you're probably should be at about 40% if you're at even spend rate every month. But these are the areas that are, way overspent. And I think because the dollar numbers are not, that significant, you're not seeing it affect the overall budget. So some of these, this one in particular, the Juvenile Justice Center repairs, 133%. Well, that's one building out of 30 buildings. So the fact that it's over 133 and some are under by, 20 or whatever, it evens out. And in talking with Joe Onzik about it, he's not concerned as much about these individual line items within the Building Management Fund 80. He's worried about this number when we start, getting to where our fund can't handle the maintenance expenditures. But it does tell you where we're spending money currently and kind of running high maintenance budgets. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. There are some areas that we have, some serious maintenance issues going on that hopefully that remedied them though. So for the rest of the year, maybe they don't have as much. It's kind of the balance of it, I guess. Staffing and hiring, we had 2 resignations since our last meeting. One of them took a job in court security, I think. And the other one was a person who was on FMLA and decided that they needed to resign and continue to care for a family member. So the positions were a maintenance tech, and that's the one that went to the court security, and then the executive administrative assistant. So right now, we're trying to hire, or we need to hire qualified staff. We have 8 vacancies right now, which seems like a lot. I think they had 6, last month. Now we've lost 2 more. So, and that's out of a staff of roughly 25 people. So it's a significant amount of people. Again, the average building management salary, is $50,000, $51,000. Industry average for just the maintenance tech is 54, and maintenance engineer average is 74. So bringing on staff's been, difficult, especially in this last month, just the transition of everything, trying to figure out where we're at, as opposed to bringing people into something without really understanding a lot of the problems. We do have some overtime that's being spent, in particular the jail, which was moved under the sheriff's staff. They've had some issues as well with staffing things. So we have people working overtime, crossing over and helping in the jail. And we've been working with the sheriff whenever there's, issues or needs. We have pretty good conversations about what they need. So trying to make do with what we have. And at the same time, I think this month we're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to hire people, market the county as an employer. So in the packet today, there's a resolution. We're really authorizing 4 new positions. And I think the 4th one, I think we can handle that with just a personnel action form. So you don't have a resolution for that one. The director of maintenance, which was the division of the maintenance roles between the judicial center, the government center. You have about 1 million square feet of buildings. And right now, I think I showed you in the previous org chart, it all funnels back to one director of maintenance. And what we'd like to do is build 2 crews of maintenance people, one for the judicial center campus, one for government center. And then we'd like to staff that with an equal, amount of maintenance engineer and maintenance technicians and custodial. So the second position in there is an office manager. One of the things that we've been looking at is between accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, dealing with the contracts, bids, RFPs, all of the things that have to be done in that office. I think that that's one area in which they need a better business manager over it. And we're recommending that. I think another question we have is, the trajectory or the long-term plans for building management, whether some of that could be, worked on in concert with the IT department under a business office or also with finance. But we are looking at someone that can help manage the office, which has a tremendous amount of contracts, purchasing, accounts payable, and payroll over time. And then the last one, we have a maintenance technician, which was the additional maintenance tech for the workload at the Judicial Center. And then converting the administrative assistant position to a business analyst for our office management group. I think that's just a personnel action form, changing the title, but using the same dollars and compensation. So we're not asking for a new budgeted position. So that's not in the resolution. The only reason why I'm asking about this is the previous employee resigned and we have the vacancy. And I think rather than hiring an administrative assistant, which really reported to the executive director and was more of an administrative assistant to the executive director, we in the IT department have a business group that handles all of our stuff. We don't do it with individuals. So we have a business group that handles all of our administration. I think this person would, and building management would fit better if we had more business analysts that deal with accounts payable, deal with the payroll, and deal with contracts and payments. An administrative assistant sounds nice, but honestly, I will tell you, Charles and I, we hand off all of our stuff to our business office and let them work through the details. And I don't know if having an administrative assistant would help us as much. I'd rather have somebody in the business office. So we have the rehiring of 8 vacancies. We talked about wage increases. We're still reviewing that for retention and hiring. There was some discussion about, pay equity and some potential for dealing with pay equity. I know that involves the ARP and some other things that are yet to be discussed. So we're still reviewing that. We are not asking for any of that at this time. The increase to the salary and wages budget based on the changes we're requesting would be $374,000 for the year. And it also increases the benefits by approximately $100,000 for the 3 positions. We have 50% of the fiscal year left, or 6 months at the time when we hire. So we're projecting, $237,000 difference for the net remainder of the year. And I think Joe calculated it out even in greater detail. This was just my rough averages. Right now we're 8% under budget overall. So we actually could absorb this anyway, but because it's payroll, and I know the county doesn't like to see contractual commodities used for payroll, we're asking for the payroll adjustment from payroll expense from the reserve fund. So you'll see that in a little bit with the resolution. But again, next year, if we were to continue with the 3 positions, it's $474,000 for 3 salaries plus benefits. And I think that we would also work, depending on the direction of the board, we would work on reconciling the business office to work between IT and building management. And there might be some efficiencies there that we haven't realized, because we're still trying to keep most of it separate right now so that building management is its own entity and IT is its own. But with a lot of the turnover and a lot of the needs, we're crossing over and using IT staff to do it anyway. So I think it'd be best if eventually we have that discussion about whether the business office that we have works with building management, IT, and finance to manage all the accounts payable, payroll, and contracts. And that would include purchasing. So I think that's a long-term discussion about how IT already, we work pretty much hand in hand with the finance office when we have issues, but just making sure that group, which actually does a lot of the county's buying, is well coordinated with purchasing and finance. Those are the staffing and hiring recommendations. And then this was the original org chart with, their first 31 employees that they had identified with, and I think we talked about this. This is the part where we're looking at changing. You have all of this is going back to one director of building management. And realistically, that's, most of the staff, and it's on, roughly 30 buildings in 7 cities. And so it's a lot to take in. And we're talking about how that gets restructured with another director of facilities management and creating some division to where, they have a narrower responsibility and it's on a campus. And then there's some satellite buildings that we have to deal with, but primarily we have this campus and we have the Judicial Center campus to deal with. Those are the 2 big campuses. This was our division of labor, and this is the director of maintenance. And then we give them the complement of staff that they need. And this was the budget estimates that we provided to finance. And that's the net difference between 1.7 and the 1.3 that you saw on the other slide. So this was 1.74. And then if you go back, this one was 1.365. And that's for a full year. That's not based on the 6-month projection. But this is what we would propose. And this is this concept of having a business office as opposed to having an administrative assistant to the executive director. And then you have a person who is kind of loosely associated to accounts payable, payroll. And they also help manage, mayoral room and custodial and grounds. And I mean, you have kind of this loose organization of it. But if you look back here, it's somewhere in here that gets taken care of. So we're just trying to put it in its own column and give it a person that is going to be responsible for it. And I think that'll help tremendously with contract management, invoices, approvals, payroll, overtime, and budget. Assembling the budget in particular is going to be a big challenge based on the people that are no longer around. Yes, sir.
Drew Frost speaking. Roger, where would Mill Creek fall under that organization?
So Mill Creek is not on this. Mill Creek is its own entity, its own tax base. So we didn't address reorganizing Mill Creek SSA. It's got 1 employee which reports to the Mill Creek Advisory Board and the executive director. So we could talk about that.
Yeah, we need to, because, right, I had 3 people I dealt with at Mill Creek. Now, Mill Creek's the size of a small town.
Yes.
Speak into the microphone.
Mill Creek's the size of a small town.
It is.
About 4,500 people, and we oversee it. And I had the executive director, the administrative assistant, and then our on-site person.
Mm-hmm.
For the last several months, I've had just the on-site person who's fairly new. So, for example, today I'm struggling to put together the entire agenda for next Monday night's meeting.
So
everything's locked up in Lily's office, so it's
so
not fun right now.
if I had my, I guess if I had my, magic 8 ball, I would say that fits under our office manager, that they would be dealing with Mill Creek and that they would have these people working on accounts payable, payroll, and custodial grounds and contracts. And we would use them with the Mill Creek SSA coordinator. Right now, I think in the past, there was always this kind of line in the sand where it's, these people don't work on Mill Creek SSA because Mill Creek SSA is not paying for them. So what we would propose is that a small portion of these salaries get paid by the SSA as a part of making it part of their responsibility to handle payables, payroll, contracts, pay the bills. And what we would look at is, maybe is it 10% of their wages or something like that? I don't know. We haven't.
I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe the executive assistant and of course the on-site person was paid by, or a portion of the executive assistant, maybe a portion of the director.
They were at one time, and I don't believe they are in the current budget. So one of the things we were asking about was even Bill Meyer, if we have him do something for the county, if say we were to have Bill Meyer, who works for the SSA, do something for the county building management, he's technically getting paid by the SSA, so we shouldn't have him do that. So, it could be that the county pays a small percentage of Bill Meyer's salary for the things that he does for us even, which is kind of maybe counterintuitive, but if it makes it all a legitimate, exchange, because you are paying using tax dollars. So if it's 5%, or 3% or something, then does that, it identifies 3% of his work is being paid by the county. So it's okay. you know, and same thing for these staff. If 10% of their work is, so you could compartmentalize it and say SSA has to pay for everything that they do, but it's not realistic. They do, you know, 5 invoices a month, and you're asking somebody to, you know, try to manage the finance system to pay those. Well, it's easier if we do it in this.
Well, just for, so everybody knows, the
Yeah.
executive assistant was on part-time leave going back to December, and then
Yes.
went on to full-time leave and then resigned. So
Yes,
here it is approaching June.
Yes.
and
Gonna be a lot of
she's been
change. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
And it takes a long time to get people up to speed
yeah.
on helping out in Mill Creek, because they have to learn.
And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to address, is that right now in that small group of people they have, it's one person that knows what's going on. If we do it in an organization with a business office, we can cross-train and have 5 or 6 people from IT and building management that know what's going on. And if one of them is out, we have other people that could step up. And that's kind of what we're doing now. It's just informally, we have people for Monday for Mill Creek SSA, we have a person from our IT business office that's going to go help with the meeting. Just because we don't have any other resources. So again, you get back to, well, that's SSA, should they be paying for it? You know, and there's this kind of line in the sand. We're trying to ignore that line for the moment, and then we'll get to that when we organize this, but
Because
we
we're
do need people.
In flux now.
Yeah, we need people. And as Drew said, the SSA needs people to, you know, when we talk about paying their bills, we have people in the IT office that are doing all accounts payable and helping them pay their bills with Michelle from building management. So we're stepping in and doing that now, but I think, you know, it'll get better. We had to catch up for a lot of things.
Yeah. And then Mr. Martin, you had a comment or question?
Well, a question relative to apportioning the cost. Is it possible to implement some kind of a time slip system?
Yeah. They're all
to
on
me,
time.
that's the solution. If you assume whatever it is, a 37.5-hour week.
Yeah.
And somebody keeps slips, it's pretty, because if I lived in Mill Creek, I'd want to know that it was fair. And if I didn't live in Mill Creek, I'd want to know.
You know, another kind of, it's a silly example, but if Mill Creek needs to use a county truck because they need to move something, seems reasonable, right? Well, but if the city called and said they need to use a county truck, is it reasonable? You know, those are the kinds of questions that come up, and we're like, okay, we need to have some sort of shared responsibility where we make sure that's perfectly clear and everybody agrees. And we can do that.
And Mr. Martin?
I have a
other comment?
non-Mill Creek question. The salary range or the salaries that you've got there.
Yes.
And then, are those current, or are those reflecting
Those
market
are
considerations?
Those would be the top end of what we're looking at or requesting. So we're trying to do not to exceed.
Okay, but I mean, is that when you talked about our salaries relative to the market?
Yes, those were based on market.
This is market.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's where you get into this maintenance engineer and maintenance techs.
I just want to make sure
These numbers are in our world low right now. These two, 65,000 and 80,000, these two are low. I will tell you.
Okay.
So that's our target. And then these up here are actually relatively close to what's existing.
Okay, thank you.
So
I can't see that, but I'm assuming you're going up and down on the pay scale there.
yeah, it's the top on the right-hand side budgetary example. Those, that is the salary of the executive director. Director of maintenance is right in that neighborhood, 95 to 100. And then director of capital projects is in that 80 to 90 something range. And then office manager, maintenance engineer.
Mr. Davis, did you have a question, comment?
I guess more a comment or observation. I think this is a really great illustration of something that we've probably all been aware of for many years now, which is that IT touches every department, every effort we make anymore. And it's been advancing that way steadily year over year. So to me, this makes a lot of sense, is that, you know, this is what the structure looks like moving forward, because IT, in fact, is part of all of the efforts that we have. And I think this is just sort of the beginning. I suspect that Roger alluded to it once in there, but didn't highlight it, which is that, yes, there's a $400,000 difference there, but if we embrace this approach, I suspect there will be some savings, some efficiencies that will arise, and we might be able to close that gap a little bit. But I think this is what it looks like moving forward.
Okay, Madam Chairman, do you have a comment, question?
There we go. Thank you. Roger, I'd like to talk about under the organizational chart, your custodial and grounds. That would be under your office manager.
Yes.
I'm curious why, because we have director maintenance 1 and director maintenance 2, or 1, two different ones.
Sure.
And I assume that 1 would be based for this campus and the other one for judicial. Why would you burden the office manager with cutting grass?
That is contracts. They're all contracts.
Just the contracts.
Yep. It's all contracts. We don't do any of the work ourselves. Yeah. So they need to, get the contract ready. And you know what the problem we have with custodial is, the same person that pays bills and does payroll is actually trying to coordinate whether or not we have the custodial staffing people in the buildings. So if somebody doesn't show up in the morning, that goes to the same person that does payroll, does accounts payable, does the bills. And there are days when like getting custodial in order is a full-time job. I mean, just trying to get, last week we had an inspection being done, and they had to pull custodial from places because people weren't showing up. So we were short, and they got 3 people on this week. In order to do custodial, they have so many background checks and employment checks. It takes us days to get somebody in. So if somebody just doesn't show up, it turns into a week-long, hey, who's taking out the garbage today? So it's an interesting management issue. It's not a, so sometimes the people on the left, the 2 custodial people, those are the people that kind of do the fill in, move the chairs. Hey, this needs to be cleaned up. The other ones are contractual that are doing the routine, change the paper, change the, the garbage, vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's actually quite an interesting operation.
Mr. Martin, did you have a comment, question?
If we're offering opinions, I'm totally supportive of this. And to Mark's point, it's an increasingly, I think it's a fiction to separate IT from building management. I mean, everything we do, everything the 2 departments do is absolutely interrelated. And I think we need to look at it as if we treat it that way. I don't know if that means combine the 2 departments, but at least as I sit here today, I wouldn't be adverse to it because they're so closely related.
We'll take that as a comment. I don't know if we want to get too far afield on speculation on who will combine at this point, but
well,
I think with the blueprint we're doing right now to get us
I
through
agree
this.
with all the comments that were made.
I think from our perspective, we're trying to make sure that we don't, do something that would prohibit you from, making different decisions in the future. It's just what would help make it better right now.
Get us
fastest,
through this, yes.
fastest we can make it better.
Fast would be good.
So
Then in a narrower environment,
yeah,
I concur with the recommendation.
and we are going to be putting IT staff, in play with these things as well. We already are. So there's the kind of synergy and combined effect of having other people. Charles, is helping with this, and we'll have other people from IT that are experts in dealing with like service desk. How do you handle a help desk, service desk? We have one of the best, around. Chris Hemeseth and John Zakozik, they run our service desk and they're great. I don't know. I think they'll be able to help us a lot with how that works. Now the issue is execute, get it moving.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you know other questions about that, we have resolutions later. We'll get to that. This is real quickly the capital projects. We have a resolution for that as well. This is what I showed you last month, and this was the list of capital projects and kind of priorities. This is what we started with, and what was a part of the capital program at the time that you approved the budget. And so what we did was, we went through kind of this process of initiation to avoid having capital projects or things touching the capital project budget that weren't a part of the program, or things that, people are asking about but haven't been officially adopted into the capital program. They weren't in the budget when you started the year. So how do they get into the program? And I think that's something that we wanted to look at and figure out, how do you officially or more formally say, it's okay to spend capital dollars on these things, and this is what we want as a board. So we formulated that into a resolution, and then we added these projects, the landscape and fence for the solar project, which was fully discussed and disclosed. It just wasn't in the list of projects. I don't know if that was timing or what, but we want to make sure it's recognized and approved. The government center, we have the creek stabilization that we talked about. It's just down the hill here. We're putting $30,000 of capital towards the study and hopefully the remediation effort. Judicial Center courtroom renovation project. This was the courtroom that the chief judge presented for remodeling the multipurpose room into a courtroom for the Safety Act. This one was something that we were trying to work through to see if they wanted to budget reserve dollars for it. And talking with Joe Onsick, we're sitting with $5.5 million in the capital budget, and a lot of kind of, you'll see them, they're line items that are not specific to any particular project. And Joe again was like, well, you have money in the fund balance, but if you have $5.5 million, you might as well, go through that, make sure you organize and dedicate that money first, and then come back and ask for money. Okay, that's fine. Charles and I talked about it, and we're ready to do that capital project from existing funds. The coroner x-ray equipment and multi-purpose building transfer to the Public Building Commission, that was already done, but it was never recognized in the capital budget. So we just added that in so you can identify with it, but those are already done in past tense. So what does that look like? These are the add-ons to the budget. There's a $1,093,976 in capital program added to it. And what we did was we did the appropriate reduction in other line items. And this is what it looks like now. So the top half is what you started the year with. There's adjustments, and then there's amended. The bottom half is all the new stuff. And if you look down here, the total amended budget that we submitted was 6.5 million. It's approved at 6.5 million. We spent 807. There's no net difference because we just balanced it all within the fund and within the budget. And there's 5.5 left right now. Now we have all these projects are kind of earmarked for money now, and they're a part of the program. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the resolution in the committee is approving of the capital program. The capital program is tied to what you approve in the architect, engineering, design, and construction resolutions, which you have with White, Healy, and HOK. So if there's something in here that has dollars associated with it for a project. Let's take the demolition of the diagnostic center or the demolition of the fleet maintenance. That's a designated program in the capital budget. So now we know how much money the board is authorized to spend to do the engineering, to do the studies and the plans for the removal and demo. We have an actual program budget for it. So we can start working with the architects and engineers to develop the plans. We'll go out, get the bids done, or the competitive part. We'll bring that back, and the board would approve of the demolition project within the budget that was approved in the program. I think that ties everything together to where the board still maintains the oversight of the capital program and oversight of the capital projects, and there's an approval process. And we also have a clear initiation of the projects so that projects that are not in the program are not started up and find out that we're tens of thousands of dollars into something without having any oversight or having it in the capital program. So that's really the only thing that we were trying to accomplish with this list of initiation. What does it take to get it into the program so that we can work on it without, finding out months later that someone is surprised that this was being worked on or being done. But this is the list of capital projects. We put this into a resolution just to formalize it so that it's not amending the budget, it's amending the projects that the budget supports. So just think of it as these are projects within the budget that hasn't changed. We're just changing the allocation of the projects, okay? So right now, we have the demolition project, which is ongoing. That's the Fabian campus. That was a budget allocation of $425,000. That's in planning and pre-bid. We haven't bid that out. We got some remediation and some discussions that we're working on with the engineering. We'll have a plan for that, and then that would go out for bids. We would bring those back in for the approval at that time. The other one would be, salt shelter, fleet maintenance, all same. And then here at the government center, we had the initiation of the coroner's office demolition, the old coroner's building. That's been delayed. Last meeting, we didn't move forward with that. But I would tell you that right now we have a need for some storage space, not for people, but for equipment. Depending on the circumstances of the health department, the PPE, the Caneback site, all the equipment and office related furniture like chairs, folding tables, we're going to need a place to move those if we need to get out of that building. And the area in the coroner's office, while I don't know that I'd recommend putting people in it, storing a bunch of chairs and tables for a period of time might be a good use for now. But that's up to the board and committee. We haven't had a discussion about the actual scheduling demolition.
Did you have it, Mr. Davist?
I don't know if this is the most appropriate time to muddy the waters but with Roger's presentation, and I saw a reference to master plan and Jason sitting here ready to talk to us. I think it's perhaps long past time to include in this discussion the concept of master plan and build out at the Judicial Center campus and take some serious steps forward to initiate that process. It addresses many of the things that Roger's pointing out to us here. And we have funding possibilities available to us, including ARP money, including bonding capacity, rates that are now changing a little bit, but still historically low. And I think it's got to be pretty clear to us all by now that we will continue to have needs that will grow. Our population will grow, our space requirements will grow. And fortunately, we had, some folks that had the foresight to give us space to do it. It's languished long enough. So I'm hoping that as we move into this approach that Roger's presenting to us, that almost immediately becomes part of our discussion.
This so far is just the cleanup of what we had designated as I know a number of you were in the administration committee prior to this, that these were called for at least 2-3 years ago.
Longer than that.
On the demolition project.
Yep.
Did you have something, Mr. Ford?
I did.
Yes.
I mean,
and then Mr. Frost. No, I think you were first, and then Mr. Frost.
Thank you. Actually, what Deb was talking about was part of what I was going to say about going forward with the master plan. Also, out of curiosity, with the coroner's office, the old coroner's office, I know at one time there was a big problem with smell. That, speaking of using it for anything, did any of that get cleaned up?
It's in relatively good condition. I know between maintenance and Mark Smith and capital projects, it is in pretty good condition right now. Probably could use paint, carpet if you're going to do anything with it other than store non-personnel related. That's why we were talking about if you wanted to use it short-term storage, that might be the best use for right now, unless you want to demolish it. Or you'd have to do some renovation if you want to look at
I'm good with the storage as long as it's organized storage, not stuff that's being.
I think it'll be tables and chairs and equipment from the VAX hub for now. We have hundreds of pieces of chairs and tables, and we either dispose of them or we store them somewhere. So they're relatively easy to store. Just stack them, and they don't need a lot of climate control. But then the other question is, do you just dispose of them or give them away?
Yard sale.
Yard sale.
We have the yard sales. And then Mr. Frost,
Just
you had
real
a comment?
quickly, obviously I've been proponent of moving to the Peck and 38 campus for a long time, and I agree with everything Mark said. This morning I was going through a big stack of old papers I had from county related stuff, and I found a document, might have been from White, but it was a Judicial Center campus from prairies to facilities, and this is 20 years old. And, you know, it's, a lot of it's still prairie, I guess is what I'm saying. As far as a first step towards what Mark talked about, I would ask this committee to, I guess, just give consensus that a few people from this board maybe talk to our bonding company, and just to find out what the current environment is and, you know, what our situation is. I've heard different things, that we've got tons of bonding capacity, but I would like to explore that, just so that when we come back to the committee in a month or so, we can at least broach the subject.
Sure.
Do you think that's appropriate? Do we have
I think it is.
I'm all for investigating without actually taking any action from.
Yeah, I don't think it hurts anything.
Yeah, okay, so from the board, I'm getting nods. No one objects to that, I think then
That
by
was-
consensus.
That was the first thing we
Okay.
did on the multipurpose building. And
That shouldn't take too much
No,
out of
we
our
would
time,
work
because
with-
you got a lot of stuff to do,
So we would
so.
work with Joe Onzik just to ask, you know,
Okay.
for a quick understanding of our position as far as,
Sure.
you know, issuing bonds.
And then, Madam Chair, did you have a comment?
Yes, I do. And I don't know if it's appropriate for this committee or not. I have expressed a concern about the location of potential government campus on 38, because that facility would be located in the city of St. Charles, and our county seal is clearly here in Geneva. So it's a legal problem.
I guess, sorry, for us speaking, I think it would be in unincorporated King County. I don't know.
It's in St. Charles. I mean, the water, electric.
Well, the water is provided by St. Charles, but I always thought we were on unincorporated.
The lots, the parcels are all unincorporated King County right now. They're in the boundary plan for St. Charles and Geneva is Britcher Road.
But I would be all for annexing into the city of Geneva. I agree. I think we should all be in the city of Geneva. We should all be in the county seat.
So independently, perhaps we should informally as well, just do some research on that and bring that back so that we can make sure that we take our appropriate
I'm
steps.
surprised we haven't answered that question yet, because I know we've been discussing that
Yeah.
for a couple of
It's been-
years.
It's been circling around.
Yeah, that should be defined in a piece of paper.
It's been discussed, I think, as the county's unincorporated, there's advantages to being in unincorporated Kane County because we are the development department.
Right.
The contractual agreements for water, wastewater, electric, those types of things are handled as, you know, as a property, but the connection to the city utilities would be also in play, and other things that would be in play if you annex it, it would be an agreement.
A lot of
We'd have to
gears
come
moving
to.
there
So-
in that now.
And that's also an agreement, I think, there are some agreements with Geneva and St. Charles, and I think even Batavia, where they provide electrical and services in other municipalities and areas just because of the feeds and the proximity to service. So, but it's a big conversation. I would not underestimate that one. That's
Mhm.
We may get,
Sounds like that by consensus should be part of the first
That
wave
round.
also, but that should start now.
I would agree. I would agree. So John and I will, Mr. Martin, I will ask you to serve on that with me, please.
okay.
We'll
been
start that
voluntold,
process.
I think, John.
So the last slide, if I may, is about other structures. We had the old coroner's office on Fabian campus. There's still things on the campus. There's an OEM storage building, which it does have the, I guess the future, it could be used for storage. The sheriff's storage building, while it doesn't have any climate control, the building itself's in fair condition. There's a berm and a bunker out there, which was used for different purposes, but it's kind of an unknown at this point. The tower is a 2-year lease. And then we do have a remediation or the environmental survey that was done. And that's probably the first step in looking at the demolition on that site. It was brought up about, the former gun range and some of the different things that might be present on the site from that study. And we do have some interest in trying to look at the remediation of some other areas. So that may come back as we get into the demolition, what other remediation might be potential while we're out there. So those are the things that we're looking at.
Mr. Martin?
How current is our environmental audit?
That was done in 2019 before we did the multipurpose building.
Okay.
We did it as a part of looking at the campus to see what it was worth.
We're gonna do, yeah, planning for that. So it's not that old.
No. And we have a full survey, we have a title search, and we have the environmental survey done. So this is the campus again. I highlighted the buildings in red that I'm talking about that are the ones that we're working on demo. There's some stuff in this area that we're talking about remediation with, where there used to be an old gun range in here. And then there's a bunker berm somewhere out in here that we need to look at as well.
Munitions bunker?
Yes.
Is that on the north side? I can see it again.
Yeah, it's where it says tower. It's just below that, Chris. Right here is the
Right there?
bunker. Yeah. And then there was in the lower level of the jail by the Sally Port, there was a gun range as well. So there's some questions about. Yeah, it would get water in there. Yeah.
That was the old basement. That was still under.
Yeah, the Sally Port was underground. You drove down a ramp into the lower level. Yeah. They had water come in over the walls.
So,
Mr. Froz, I think had his hand up first, and
and
then
to-
Mr. Ford.
I guess to Roger's question, as far as direction or consensus, that OEM storage building, even though it's very remote, it's really nice building. It's
Yes.
insulated. It's really nice.
In good condition.
The sheriff's storage building is a pole barn, just like you'd see on a farm, uninsulated. I know there's some
Yes.
raccoons that live in there, but for example, recently the sheriff had impounded like all the equipment from a landscaper for some reason. And, they had them in the multipurpose building. So something like that sheriff's storage building could,
Yeah.
easily be used for. So I would recommend those two just stay there until such time that we do demolition. And
So-
if somebody were to buy this and do a major construction
one.
project there, they might want one of those buildings for,
So our position is
construction
that
use.
they would be inventory. We'll just hold them in inventory. We don't want people in them, but
Yeah.
just inventory and storage.
And you're saying that the three in red are the ones we're focusing on right now.
Those are demolition.
And those, we've already proceeded in our last
Yes,
meeting.
Mark's working on the
As you
plans
recall.
with White and Company to get the
That-
next plan phase done, which is remediating any of the environmental issues. We have underground tanks and some other things that we're looking at from the environmental survey.
There's also, Drew, you would probably remember this. I think just underneath the arrow where it says parking, we used to call it the pauper's grave.
Yeah.
There's a small.
That is conveniently on the Forest Preserve property.
I
Is it?
understand,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Oh, great.
Well, there you go, Chris.
Yeah, but I will tell
We
you
have
that
accounted for that.
it's actually accessible only from this parking lot, which is on our property.
Right. So I'm happy
Sorry.
about the forest preserve.
Yes.
I would like to ask about the old house. That is a historically protected house
Yes.
and we can't knock it down.
No. So we've talked to a group that's looking at preserving that. And I met with Mark Van Kerkhoff. One of the things that we are looking at is there's an old, it's not, I wouldn't even loosely call it a garage. It's a collapsing, wood structure behind the house. And they had asked us about taking that off the property when we do the diagnostic center. And Mark, as the architect and the preservation people, said it's unrelated to the house and it's actually a hazard. It's falling down
Like
as
a
we speak. So we're going to take that
nuisance.
out. And we're also talking about pulling the brush and stuff away from the house so that it's cleaned up. And then Mark Van Kerkhoff was talking about whether or not we could look at something to deal with the storm water draining off the roof and damaging the limestone. If it's, gutters or deflecting the water. But we didn't get very far into that
Well,
yet.
that house would not have gutters, and to put
Not-
gutters on a historic home from the
Yeah.
1840s is completely
something-
inappropriate.
Something to keep it.
Tarping it or something. because right now the roof is no good.
I think they have some kind of tarp or some
They
kind
do.
of tar.
There is a tarp on it
paper,
right
yeah.
now.
So Mark Van Kerkhoff, he's the architect. He was going to be looking into it.
So if I may suggest, excuse me, John.
Well, I'm not sure, Madam Chair. This is my meeting.
Oh, I'm so
Would you-
sorry.
Would you like to ask to
is.
do something about that?
Yes, yes.
Again, I'm going to remind folks that we are focusing on the three red buildings. Is that correct? I mean, I'm not sure how much time we want to spend here.
Yes.
House is
For the
red.
three, I understand where that's at. It's not in red. it's not to be dealt, that's a red roof, I think, or a red tarp.
Says old house red right there.
That one.
That one right there?
Yeah, right, that's
Yeah.
red.
That's not part of what we're discussing today. Now, we can discuss it, but we were primarily, is that maybe not
It's not a topic that we're looking to do any demolition. So
so just those three
But
that
it
are up
is-
there. So then
I'll step down.
with that in mind, go ahead, but I don't want to get too far afield, but if you're,
Chair, the only reason I brought it up is it looked red to me and I was putting
Oh,
red
yes,
flags
I'm-
on that.
we could bring that back as a discussion, maybe even have
I'm sure
future
we
discussion
we
about
will be
it. 'Cause
discussing,
it's a
mostly
long-term.
today, we're talking about the shed behind there, which has nothing to do with the
Yes.
building and some brush around the
Yeah.
outside. I think.
And that's
So,
a long-term plan. These guys are looking at 3 to 5 years.
yeah, so that's, so just just to keep things
So-
moving along, and I'm sure Jason's
Yep.
fascinating back there by listening to all this, but I think we're paying him by the hour
Yeah.
as well, so.
So that's the conclusion. We have resolutions that are in the packet. We'll talk about those when we get to resolutions. So any other questions? We do have Jason here to talk about the planning process and the assessment. And I think I'd like to get him up here to talk about that.
And that may help illuminate some of the things about the movement of any structures from down here to the government center in the form of needs and conditions and assessment. Great. Well, thank you for your patience. This is Jason Dwyer, our lead architect from White, and you're going to be discussing space needs and conditions assessment.
That's
Yes?
correct. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Jason Dwyer with White and Company. It's been quite some time since I've had a chance to get back in front of the full committee, so I'm happy to be here today to give you an update. I thought since it's been a while that it might make sense to just start with a little bit of an overview of what we're doing, what we've done, kind of where we're at with things. So you've engaged us as part of the overall contract to work on space needs analysis and physical conditions assessments of your current facilities. So I'll kind of walk you through that. So just, I tried to bullet point in fairly simple terms, kind of the scope of what we're looking at on the two major components: space needs at the top, physical conditions assessment at the bottom. Put check marks next to the items that we've completed to date. So I'll be getting into these in a little bit more detail, but just kind of quick overview. For the space needs assessment, we've done some data collection. A lot of that is evaluating existing information, past reports, that kind of thing, and sending out questionnaire surveys to all of the different departments to collect data from them on their current conditions, current staffing, deficiencies that they see, what highlights they might have in terms of targeted additional staff growth over time. We've looked at a lot of other metrics like population projections, other workload indicators. And then we sat down with every different department to do a formal interview with them to talk through the details, assess the projections. A lot of that is spreadsheet work, looking at different options there for what growth might look like. And what we've got to right now is a summary for all of the departments. So I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. But next steps on this part would be to send the summaries off to all the different groups, make sure we're all in agreement with that, and then summarize and sort of finalize a needs projection. Now, on the physical condition side, we focused on really looking at the condition of the different buildings with an eye toward, what kind of deferred maintenance issues are there, what's the quality of the asset as a whole. So we've done kind of an initial gauging of how detailed we wanted to get. That was work we did with Chris Allen several months back, determining the level of investigation for the various buildings. Some of them we know for sure are going to be very long-term, high-quality assets for the county, and we're doing a little bit deeper dive in those so we can have a better assessment about the amount of investment you need to make to keep them great quality assets. So all of our field investigation work is done at this point, and we're starting to summarize the findings and work on cost projections for the required maintenance and upgrade components. And really what we're looking at is taking this to kind of a two-pronged approach. I guess I'll say, for lack of a better term, having a grading of each of the buildings. What's the quality level from a physical condition, and then a couple other criteria that I'll go through. But then also trying to summarize the details of cost in a format that aligns with a 5-year capital plan. So maybe this is a little hard to read, but I wanted to put just kind of a little graphic schedule together to show you sort of where we've been, where we're going with things. So at the top in blue is the work that we've been doing relative to the space needs assessment. All those red diamonds on there were specific interview dates. A lot of that work happened. We really started this work in July of last year as we were just getting under contract on the project. So we distributed surveys and then did interviews really extending from early August through early November. Hit a bunch of them early. We had a couple stragglers. We were just trying to work through times to get meetings with, but that was the interview phase. And then we kind of proceeded from mid-October through mid-December on the analysis of the needs. Took a little gap there right at the end of the year because we refocused our energies on the purple down below, working on some of the physical conditions assessments, and then picked up again on the analysis of needs and preparing the summary findings. So the red dot that says draft report is kind of where we're at right now on that. Next steps being review of the findings with the department and then finalizing the report at the end of June. So on the physical conditions side, we didn't start that immediately. We wanted to get a little legwork under our belt here in terms of meeting with the different groups because I kind of illuminated some of the issues as we walked through the buildings. And then we spent some time evaluating a level of assessment to do. We actually shifted course a little bit on that midstream just to kind of reprioritize some of our focus. So we did some early field investigation on this campus here, the government campus, in November. And then came back and did the Judicial Center campus and the other buildings, really extending from January through April of this year. So we've been summarizing those findings, and then you kind of see the progression to develop the cost projections, quality of assets, and so forth, with, again, the objective to complete the physical condition assessment report right around the same time as a needs analysis at the end of June. So just as a sort of a summary of cost, when we met on this project early on, we talked about, what is an order of magnitude for a cost on this. I think our contract was assigned as kind of a blanket contract of availability for multiple services. You've engaged us for just a couple smaller ancillary services. We helped Jody and her team a little bit with some work on landscape assessments for the solar field and that, but the majority of our work's really been focused on these two primary activities. When we got together early on, we talked about a projection of somewhere on the order of $350,000 for these works, which is kind of based on work we've done for other neighboring counties, Will County being the most recent, although the first significant effort on that was back in 2010. So just kind of a summary of financials to date. We've expended about just roughly $230,000 to date on the project, and we're projecting about $105,000 remaining to get to the end of this phase of work. I'll talk about some carry-on work after this, a little later in the presentation, but wanted to give you kind of a status update on expenditures for the work we're doing so far. Okay, so just again, real quick, we've met with all the groups. So I just highlighted the different departments in the judicial, public safety side, and county government side, just to kind of give you a recap of that. I think that's in your packet as well. So I wanted to give you a snapshot. I don't know if we have enough time today to get into the weeds and detail on this, but I just want to give you a snapshot of what the draft report looks like. There's a lot of detail that goes behind this and the notes and projection calculations on spreadsheets and so forth, but we've just tried to distill it down for each of the groups into a 4-page spread that sort of documents where they exist in the facility so far, documents existing square footage, a lot of the information we gathered from the needs interviews, any specific adjacencies for operational efficiency, specific deficiencies on the space or square footage that they need to be considering. And then, just kind of pulling that all together. So these are 2 pages. I just use supervisor assessments as my example here. Then on the following 2 pages, left side there, that kind of summarizes projections for staffing. And that really is what's being used to drive a projection for space needs for the different groups. So just to briefly explain, we've got a couple different projection models that we're using for staffing. We like to run a number of different scenarios and then evaluate what's going to be the most appropriate scenario. Sometimes we find that there's a close alignment with historical growth in staff that will tend to increase. So we run a scenario on historical growth, number change. We also look at ties of staff to population. Certain departments tend to align closely, staffing and population. Judiciary, there's a couple components with judges, with population, so that's often a key indicator. But then we also take into account departments' recommendations, knowing what their workload is, and other workload indicators. Things like legislation can also have a significant impact on staffing, which I think has been discussed at some length in the past relative to the Safety Act, for instance, and what that might mean for some of the judicial agency office groups. So we run the different scenarios, and then we determine what we think is the most applicable for the different department and use that as a projection. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this is going to be perfect. There's no perfect crystal ball on this, but what we're trying to do is come up with the best assessment of what the growth projection might be out to the year 2050. And then we always want to probably be a little bit conservative on this because this directly translates into space needs. And we found in our work on these types of reports that it's better to be a little conservative and project a little bit more on the staffing and space needs, because ultimately you're going to use that for planning purposes. And then let's say you decide to move forward with a new building, for example, you can always, I mean, you're going to get into much more detail of programming of a building, and there's always an opportunity to scale back. But often once a budget is set for a project, it's much harder to go back and increase that budget than it is to reduce it. So just to give you a little bit of a rationale in terms of how we do this analysis. And then on the right side, that translates into space needs. We use metrics of standard square footage per person based on national standards. And then we look at department-specific requirements. That would be in the what we call department gross square foot other category. We document specific needs they might have if it's a large storage space or training space or something for that matter based on the department to determine the overall square footage. So that's just kind of an overview of the rationale. On the next slide, and so we're working on profiles of these for all government departments and all judicial departments. We summarize all those into tables. So this is the summary work in progress for the government side of the house. And you'll see that we're showing increase in staffing that's, you know, a little bit more than the increase in square footage. Reason for that is, you know, what we found certainly with some of the older buildings, they weren't purpose built for the operations that are being conducted in the building. So there's not as much efficiency. When we do our space projections, we look at it as a purpose built sort of efficient modern building, which tends to be a little bit more compact and efficiently organized. Certainly the next step in terms of planning, if you were to do a renovation versus a new construction, we'd want to temper those numbers a little bit based on how you approach the project. But this gives you kind of a good planning metric in terms of, you know, how to think about overall square footage for the different groups and departments. There's a couple sort of lingering items that I'll go through here in a minute that we still think may have an impact one way or the other on these. So I'll click to that next. So as I said before, working to kind of finalize the details with each of the groups here in May, and then summarize all the reports by the end of June. So the additional open considerations, and part of this was why we took a little bit of a pause to wrap things up. There's some parallel studies being done, one of which was work that the chief judge and the judicial group was doing in terms of their operational study. A lot of that really, I think, is the future of operations and other things that maybe don't have a direct impact on space needs, but we wanted to make sure that if there were items that came out of that did have an impact on the space needs, we were incorporating that. So we're still working to try to get a meeting set with the judicial leaders just to kind of confirm that there's, you know, any alignment there, or things that may need to tweak or temper the projections we're making. The other one is the health department. I know you've been looking at kind of the future of the health department, and we've collected the data with everything we know about them now, their operations now, But I think, you know, and we could sort of end there, footnote and document kind of what we've done. But I would say if there is any additional information that says we want to look at expanding service in a certain type, I'd love to have the opportunity to incorporate that into our findings if the timing's appropriate.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Thank you.
question?
Yes, not a question, just a
Comment?
comment. Mental health would be one area of expansion.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's something that came up in our discussions before.
And the TB clinic has got to be away from individuals. It has to be separate. It can't be in a communal environment.
Mm-hmm. I guess, and we don't have to cover it necessarily here today, but I'd love to find the best mechanism to get feedback on that. I mean, I understand the idea of mental health component, and we have pretty good familiarity with robust mental health services. We've done a lot of work with DuPage, and that's been a big focus of theirs for many, many years. But I'd love to find the right group to connect with to try to quantify that in a little bit better detail. So maybe that's something we can follow up on, because I think that'd be a good, it's good timing now to get that incorporated into the planning as a sort of subset item, so that we have that top of mind as we're thinking about the future of the health department.
New executive director will probably be on board for the health department. Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully that will happen.
Yeah.
For sure.
That would assist, I'm sure.
They would have buy-in on that.
Yeah.
The building would not be built yet or remodeled at that point. The hire we're hoping will happen by the summertime.
Okay, thank you.
I guess from a timing standpoint, then, I mean, I'm, you know, I sense the urgency to kind of, you know, pull these things together. I think, yeah, if we can probably conclude the work as we have it now. And certainly we could, you know, once the executive director's on board, we can do a separate focus on mental health and kind of roll that into other planning work. So up to your discretion.
If I may, the other one is the sheriff is looking for pre-arrest diversion and counseling. So there may be some synergy with the mental health component of a building, as well as the drug rehab center that he's looking at facilitating, as well as this pre-arrest diversion. That has been anecdotal talk, and I don't know if that is on your plan. That has been discussed yet.
Yeah, we met with the sheriff, and I know that the sheriff was looking at trying to utilize some existing space within the jail at one point. I know that I think it was the last admin committee meeting, there was a discussion about maybe another building. So we're aware of the issue. So I think, yeah, if it'd be good to do a little bit deeper follow-up on that, so we can try to quantify that a little bit better and think about best locations and that kind of thing. So I'll keep that on my list of items to keep on top of. And then the last thing, certainly, you know, we always want to be thinking about these things with alignment for energy efficiency, environmental initiatives, and your green building policy as well. We've spent time with Jody in the past, and that's certainly something that we're always thinking about, both here in terms of planning for space needs, as well as on the conditions assessment side, and things that we could take advantage of there that maybe you spend a little bit of investment, but it's got a return.
Yeah, return on that. Yeah.
Okay, so let me switch gears then to move over to the physical condition side. Just again, quick summary. We've kind of gone through all the different buildings. I won't belabor that. I think you're all familiar with your buildings. Similar kind of concept for each of the buildings. We're doing a summary report of findings that documents all the information we found. A lot of it's trying to memorialize the information we've collected, some of the data on the buildings, key issues, conditions that we found to be problematic. And then this one you really won't be able to read, but this is an example of our spreadsheets of data. So really, there's all kinds of data behind these. We're trying to look at every component and system within the building to determine things like, you know, an air handling unit. What's its useful life left? You know, is it 25 years old and is it approaching its projected useful life? Do you need to start thinking about replacement of that unit? So a lot of detail goes into this for all the different buildings. And we're categorizing these items in terms of the level of importance of the need. Is it a critical need? Is it just a repair? Is it something you want to monitor or something that's in good condition? So there's a matrix behind that. We apply dollars to that, and that kind of leads into you know, how you can set up a capital plan to resolve existing issues or get ahead of issues that might be coming up down the road. So two kind of outcomes, as I mentioned at the beginning on this, this idea of a building asset viability. So we're going to have a conditions assessment score that's purely about, you know, what's the quality of the exterior wall and the systems in the building? Is it good, bad? But also there's two other components we'll look at that are maybe a little bit more subjective, that having to do with how a building works in terms of its operational efficiency or its ability to provide proper constituent service. And then the ability of the building to support future space needs or operational efficiency. So, you know, for example, if you have an older building that is set up in such a way that, you know, you're kind of out of space, you get kind of a low assessment score in terms of its ability to support future space needs. Or if an addition is not practical, you know, this building, for example, it's not wonderful in terms of its constituent support because, you know, you kind of come in, you got to go to multiple floors. It's a little bit confusing. Accessibility is not great. So those are the kind of things we'd be looking at a little bit more subjective basis to determine sort of the quality level of a specific asset. And the reason we're doing that is we're trying to make recommendations for the county to spend your money on your best assets. You know, you may find that you've got an asset that's working, but it's not a great long-term asset. You want to spend just a minimal amount of money to stabilize and keep it from deteriorating any more. But something like the Judicial Center, for example, which is a great asset for the county and will always be a long-term asset, you want to make sure you're putting the proper money into that to keep it a top-tier asset so it doesn't deteriorate into something that you know, doesn't live to its full life potential. So what we're trying to do with the building assessment viability, get that done by the end of May. Then that feeds into what we're talking about for a 5-year capital plan. So all those spreadsheets of data that you couldn't read on the screen before, that's really all the work we're going to go through, and we're prioritizing our focus on your best long-term assets. Certainly there may be sort of stabilizing investment recommended for shorter term building assets or assets that, you know, you may not use forever. But in terms of how do we prioritize within the projects, certainly probably first and foremost would be health, life, safety issues. If there's something that is a risk to the occupants or visitors of the building, those issues will be identified as your most critical investment items. Next would be things like preservation of the asset. So if you have a leak somewhere, or a roof problem or something that's causing continued deterioration of the building, we want to get that resolved so it just doesn't keep costing you more money down the road. Then we get into things like security risks, continuity of operations. So if you have a problem with incoming power service or a generator that's in really poor condition that could go out and disrupt operations, those would also be kind of primary focal items. Then kind of on down the list, accessibility, any environmental concerns. And again, here looking at energy efficiency. So, you know, we may say that lighting, for example, maybe the lighting is average in the building, or you're having some issues, but it may be worth prioritizing that higher because you can replace the lighting and actually get some grant dollars for that and get a good payback on it. So it makes sense to make that investment a little bit sooner, even though it may not be a life safety type item. So just to give you kind of a sense of how we're looking at prioritizing the items. And then from an importance factor, certainly critical items, things that need to be done in the first 2 years, and then what we call replace items that, you know, could be done in a 3 to 5 year window. So all that kind of comes together to develop a projected recommendation for a 5-year capital plan investment in your buildings, focusing on, you know, your most critical items first. And then, you know, I'm not going to say we're overly front end loaded, but the idea would be to try to balance those things out in the 0 to 5 year range so that you have kind of a consistent expenditure on capital investment that you can plan for. Certainly if we're identifying an item that, says in year one, you need to spend more money because they're all critical, we're going to make that recommendation. Or if you say, hey, based on how we're looking at revenue streams or different balancing of funding, let's put more money into year 3 versus year 2. I mean, there's a lot of back and forth we can do once we have the data. So that's really all the work we're going to be doing over the next month or so here, so that we're trying to give you a document that you can use coming into your budgeting timeframe coming up in June.
So it says 15th of June, is it completion? You just said the end of June, 15th of June?
Well, we're trying to get you cost data for purposes of when you start your budgeting cycle mid-June, and then kind of bundle it all up by the end of June.
So we get it into our budgeting. So
Yeah.
we make sure we plan ahead.
Right.
Work on that.
Right.
Okay, great.
So, so I just put this simple graphic together. Really our focal area is the blue and sort of orange boxes on the left side. Space needs, physical condition, that comes together as a report by end of June. I'm showing that we're kind of rolling out at the bottom this 5-year capital plan that will be used for your budgeting. And that's the work that we're focused on to date. So the next step beyond that is, what was talked about by a couple members earlier in terms of then how to translate that into capital plan. So we'll have addressed a lot of the short-term things and preservation of asset items by the work we're looking at right now. But then the next step then is to prioritize your longer-term items, to start thinking about what does that mean toward the end goal of major capital projects. And I think it's really important, what was said earlier, to find good alignment between funding realities and the capital projects themselves. We've done a number of master plans for different counties that, because they weren't aligned effectively with funding potential, they end up being a nice book that sits on a shelf. And I think, we're certainly going to look at where you need to go. There's a back and forth that comes into play there, but it really would be helpful to try to get a sense of current financial situation, bonding capability, and that, so that as we think about prioritizing a specific project or developing that master plan, we've got an eye toward what's most important and how can it be executed with available fund dollars, so you don't end up with a book that sits on the shelf. So that's really what we would project moving forward, would be working on prioritization workshops. I'll talk about that for a moment. It's helpful a lot of times, certainly going through all the work with the different departments, we kind of can identify what are the most important priorities. And just kind of from what we've developed to date, there's definitely some real important space needs priorities in the judicial side. That's been that way for a little bit of time. It's continued to be more of an issue. So there's going to be an easy way to quantify what's important, but we also want to make sure we're getting the right group of leadership together to have those discussions and make sure that we've got a consensus and support for what are the county's priority items, so that you don't find yourself going down a path that isn't supported well. So I would suggest maybe even coordinating a couple larger workshops where we present findings of this report, do some sessions. We've done this before with the county years past, and prior work we've done where we got a group of key department heads, elected officials, even a couple key public members to come in and workshop to make sure that we were all in agreement on what the priorities are. So that's something to think about. We can talk about that a little bit more, but that work, I would say, could be done in July, and then we could kind of pull all that together to develop a master plan of major capital projects, I'm saying between the August to November timeframe of this year. And I think, I do have one more slide, sorry. I just kind of put that in the same graphic. So I showed you this before, but I kind of highlighted a couple extension bars, the red arrow, which really is the output of the 5-year capital plan at the bottom, and then the work of prioritization workshops in July, and then the green arrow extension, kind of a 4-month window to kind of pull together capital plan projects through a master planning process. And that's where you could address things like, potentially moving to the judicial center site and annexation or any of those kind of things can all be kind of tackled in that time frame to make sure that it's a well-conceived and well-supported master plan.
Okay. Then Mr. Davis, you had a comment, question?
Yeah, I guess first of all, thank you, Jason, and to White and Company. Listening to this reminds me that we've had a solid history of success working with White and Company before, and at the risk of becoming the broken record already, if we had come into today with and not just had the consensus to do a couple of initial things about bond council and location, but a solid plan to move forward, I think that what has been done so far by White is exactly what would have been part of the next initial steps. This will be incredibly useful in moving forward with a master plan, which is actually listed on there, and build out and development at the JC campus. So to me, this is
I'm excited.
Exciting news. We've taken steps that are positive, and this is one more tool in that toolbox that'll help us get there. So thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Froz, comment?
Yeah, I think this is great, and I'm totally satisfied with the July 1st. I think that'll be almost perfect timing for us, especially if we get back with some of these other answers we talked about today. Looking at all the charts and spreadsheets, I'm looking forward to the conclusion chapter. Yes. I guess just finally, my question, Jason, we have that old site plan for the judicial center that White did many, many years ago, kind of, simple. Will that be updated, or that be considered kind of a separate project if we get into talking about buildings?
That would be part of the master plan efforts. And certainly, as you know, it looks a little different today than it did in that diagram with the multi-use facility and so forth. So we're going to reevaluate things. But yeah, coming on the master plan would be more detail. We take all the individual needs and bundle them into proper projects. So like, I'll just take for sake of discussion, if you decide to build a new government center building, recreate sort of what's on this campus, we would take all the different departments that would belong in that building, put them together, add what we call a building grossing factor to come up with an overall square footage for the building. And then we would lay out kind of location, test fit, parking, plan it all out for a project, kind of more at a project level. So it would include diagrams of updating the site. And that's where I think we'll talk about how detailed to get with that. I think certainly projects that might be at the highest priority level that have good support, you may want to take those a little bit farther to get more detail. That way we can be more certain of costs and any other issues that may come into play, and others that might be, 20 years down the road or something, we might just conceptualize a home for them, but not get into as much detail because things can change in time. So that's kind of the process that happens during prioritization and leading into the master plan.
Thank you.
Sure you don't want to hang around for another 4 years?
I might.
Yeah, get slated or something.
Can always come to public comment.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
3 minutes off topic. Just one moment, Ms. Bates. Mr. Martin?
I have two questions. First, and to the fact of the Route 38 campus. I think we announced decades ago when we bought that and we began to construct there that the overall plan for the future was to consolidate facilities on that site. Am I fair in assuming that you're building into this report when we're going to have to build a parking deck out there, because they're frightfully expensive and maybe frightfully necessary depending on our utilization of the real estate. So I want to know that we have that in our future. And then the second thing is, if you, and again, I'm assuming you're doing all this, but if you look at the age of the people that show up at the treasurer's office to pay their tax bill, my generation is soon to be dying off. And I would bet you our recording secretary hasn't been inside a bank for 10 years. The younger generation just doesn't utilize these facilities. And I just want to make certain that we're anticipating the reality of what the world has become. I mean, the utilization of the judicial center you know, we were forced into it by the pandemic, but what we're finding is that huge chunks of time and money can be saved by not being physically present in a room or hauling prisoners in from a jail or that type of thing. So I'm hoping when I see this that that kind of thing is accommodated, because the thought of how much space we need for people to come and pay their tax bills when nobody's going to be coming in to pay their tax bill gives me pause.
Sure you don't want to hang around for another 4 years, Mr. Martin?
I'll make two quick points on that. Relative to parking, yes, we would be looking at decks if needed. Certainly, if we can avoid them, much the better, because they are frightfully expensive, as you said. But that will be part of the consideration. And then in our analysis and meetings with the departments, we talked about a lot of those operational items. How many people are coming, what might change over time. Had a lot of discussions about just changes in work habits and that. As an example, Chief Judge was really good, very open-minded about looking at alternatives. I think a silver lining of the pandemic is it did push people to think differently, use much more technology, especially in the court system. Chief Judge has been, very open to exploring different ways to handle that, slightly different courtroom layouts and that. So a lot of good discussion on that. That'll continue to evolve over time, but those were all things that we talked about.
Thanks.
Okay, now is there anybody else on the committee? Mr. Ford wants to come out, and then after the committee, Ms. Bates, I'll have you. But first, Mr. Ford.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank you and White and Company for this report. I am very eager and anxious to see the end of this. I'll be sitting on the edge of my chair at that time. This is a very thorough follow through with what we need. I really want us as a group to take this information and produce this master plan that we're going to follow through with all the way, instead of it being a book on the shelf.
Get on the shelf, right?
Right. The other thing is, you mentioned about the technology part. I would love to hear from the different department heads on what their foresight is when it comes to technology part, especially RT people, how that's going to play a part of this, and what kind of space and infrastructure they need to keep up with the future of IT if we start doing more things with Zoom or whatever it's going to take, how that's going to play a part of it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ford.
Another quick one. I don't
Okay,
want to frustrate Mavis too much, but
yeah, well, you get one more shot, then you get two chances.
quickly,
Mr. Davis.
I'm not sure I'm not sure that parking is avoidable. That's probably a structure we have to do. We had some discussion previously about P3 efforts. Is that something that will still at least be factored in, or in the,
Yeah, I think.
I don't know if everybody heard that, because you didn't speak into your microphone, but P3?
Well, yes, the public-private
partnerships.
Partnerships, thank you. At least be one of the considerations as we have that on your list.
That's something we'll definitely talk about. That ties into, as you think about things like bonding for projects. So I won't get into the weeds on public-private partnerships, but essentially it's a mechanism for private enterprise to be engaged on a project. It's a different financing model a little bit too. So sometimes parking structures, something that has a potential to generate revenue, can be a great source. Somebody else will pay for the investment, and it'll be usable by the county. So
solar panels.
There's a lot of avenues to talk about with things like that. And those are all the kind of discussions we can have as part of master plan.
Details later.
Yep.
Yes, to be discussed. Okay, Madam Bates.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
As another voice on this subject, I would like to remind everyone of the sustainability of preserving existing buildings. You can save energy, you can save on construction materials, you save on landfill junk. There's an old saying that if all you've got is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. And I want to remind everybody, and thank you to Jason for this wonderful report that is very thorough and very understandable. But if all you have is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. I would like to say that if you've got an architect, then every problem looks like a new building, because that's what architects do and love to do and what they're good at doing. Mr. Martin made a good point that people don't go into buildings anymore. Do we really need big new government buildings? And for this master plan, please do not presume a new government center, which could be a huge expense to the county and to future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bates. Okay, anybody else committee-wise? Madam Chair, Mr. Froz,
I'd just like to
one
say
more
that-
time.
I would just like to say that we are thinking of future generations with our planning today.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
enough said. Mr. Froz, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Alan,
Yes, Miss Allen.
this is just a memory back to our recent building of the multi-use facility. When we're trying to figure out buildings and bonding, let's lean heavily on Mr. Onzik, as if we didn't lean on him heavily enough already. But what he was able to do for us was to say that the multi-use facility building was something that we could bond, and we would pay interest for the first 2 to 3 years, and then an old bond would be paid off, and after that we could use that freed up money to pay off principal and interest until this bond was done. So what he was doing was figuring out how to work the expense of a bond into our budget so that we could handle it. If we're talking about, a $60 million building, and yes, of course, the county can do lots of bonding. The fact is you still have to pay for the bond. And so we'll need his help to see how to work that into our finances, if that's the direction we want to go. Thanks for letting me talk.
Sure, not a problem. I see a note here from Dr. Silva. Did you have a comment at this time?
No comment, Chair. Thank you. The comment actually was referring to the conversation regarding the health department and how we are going to hopefully have a new director to bring into that conversation soon.
Oh, I see.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your
Sorry.
time.
Thank you. Okay. Well, that being said, then I think that's all the questions and comments we have at this time. We certainly look forward to our complete plan and 5-year plan in the very near future.
Great.
So thank you for attending.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Appreciate all your work, as I believe the rest of the committee has already mentioned as well. All right, and moving on here, then I think some standard resolutions. Are we ready
Yes,
for
sir.
that? Yeah, resolution.
Yes, if you'd like, I'll go through those.
Okay, well, how about if I do, I will entertain a motion to authorize extension of a 20-acre farmland lease agreement.
Froz moves.
Froz moves.
Council second.
We'll give Gums a second. Then that would you?
Yes,
Mr.
this is
Fonso?
a release of the property north of the Judicial Center, the 25 acres, 20 acres tillable to CNC Farm. They're the incumbent. They're looking at a 3-year lease renewal. We don't get a lot of revenue from this because they just maintain and take care of the property. It's $3,312 per year. Total contract value for the 3-year term is $9,396. It's revenue, and we're recommending approval.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Fonstock? Madam Chair?
To play devil's advocate, if we move forward with this, 23 will still be in planning phase. Will we need access to that property, the 25 acres, in 24 or 25?
Directed to Mr. Fonstock. Question?
There is a clause for termination, early termination. We just have to serve notice so we can get out. We just can't take the field with their product or farm, their produce is in the field or whatever. So, but there is a notice for termination.
Without compensation. Even.
I think it's either 180 days or 90 days, something like that.
Great.
Okay, so
thanks.
there is an option for that. Okay, anybody from the committee or on the board? Okay, hearing no questions or comments, can we have our recording secretary over here very patiently?
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Frost,
Yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes. Okay, then may I have a motion and a second for authorizing capital projects from capital fund as mentioned by Mr. Fonstock.
Martin moves.
Martin? Ford second. And then,
Again, this is the capital projects from the capital fund. It simply is identifying the projects. It is not a budget adjustment. It's not changing the finances of the capital budget or program, and it is balanced with the fiscal year 2022 budget. These are projects that are just identified by name. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those. But again, the top portion of the table is the capital projects that were approved in the budget, and the bottom portion is what's been modified since the approval.
and that was that table you showed
Yes,
earlier.
it's in the it's incorporated in the resolution, and it's $6,506,976 in capital projects.
Mr. Chairman,
All right, Mr. Ford, question, comment?
I'm just saying, now it is included, so we do have.
Oh, okay,
Just want to note it that we do have.
okay,
We get it.
great, thank you. And so then, any other comments or questions? A roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Bras, Gums,
Gums, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes. Next resolution E, item E, resolution authorizing a contract extension for refuse removal and recycling services for Kane County Government, Division of Transportation, Kane County Sheriff, Animal Control, and the Kane County Forest Preserve.
Gums will move.
Gums move.
Ford seconds.
Ford seconds. Mr. Fonstock.
This is a one-year renewal for a contract that we have with Waste Management. They have provided in the resolution, which we probably don't need to review, a list of rates and increases that are coming with the one-year renewal. As you know, the inflation of different fuel and services, there is a price increase. There's also been some discussion regarding fees associated with it, which we will be working on with Energy and Environment and Recycling as we go forward to the contracting phase. So we have not signed the contract for the renewal, but this is authorizing it, and it's budgeted across various line items for the fiscal year, and we're recommending approval.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Fonstock? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Bras,
Yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes.
Passed.
Item F, resolution authorizing janitorial service for Kane County facilities. Move by
Ross. Martin, seconds.
Martin, second. And
Okay.
Mr. Fonstock.
So this is for janitorial services for all buildings. It's a contract amount of $1.2 million per year. It's a 2-year agreement with an option for 3 one-year renewals. It is with Peterson Cleaning of Rockford. This was a RFP issued by purchasing and reviewed. We do have the recommendation to go forward with Peterson Cleaning. Again, we've had some challenges with different cleaning companies and janitorials. They had 3 responses, and the recommendation was to go with Peterson. I believe, we're going to be looking at this further as the year goes on. And it's just because the demand for staffing cleaning has been very challenging. So we're recommending the approval, and it's 1.2 million per year for 2 years.
Okay, and then extension.
And extensions.
Yeah, if it's working out.
Yes.
Okay, any questions? Wait.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Bras, Gums,
Gums, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes.
Passed.
Item G, resolution authorizing contract for Kane County janitorial supplies. A motion by
Gums will move.
Gums,
Berman.
Berman second. And then Mr. Fonstock.
Okay. This is our janitorial supply contract. This was bid out by purchasing. It is recommended that we go with Warehouse Direct out of the 5 bids. It's $90,000 per year for 2 years with 3 one-year renewals. It's a budgeted expense, and we're recommending approval.
Okay, any questions? Roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Bras, Gums,
Gums, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes.
Passed.
Item H, resolution authorizing, excuse me, the reorganization of the Building Management Department, creation Department, comma, creation of 3 new positions, comma, and budget adjustment. And this was included in the presentation that you.
Davis moves.
And a handout provided.
Second.
Davis, Ford.
Ready?
Any questions? I think it was pretty clearly explained. Thank you, Mr. Bonstock.
There are budget adjustments that were provided by finance in the actual resolution that I handed out, if anyone wants a fiscal notation, so.
Okay. Comments, questions? Roll call, please.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Frost, Gums,
Gums, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes.
Pass.
And then on to information technology.
Okay.
Resolution authorizing professional services contract for web design, moved by
Ford.
Ford.
Ross.
Ross seconds. Mr. Feinstock.
So we use web design services for some small projects for editing and modification to web pages, websites, and graphics. This was done through an RFP with purchasing, and we're recommending Cassie Design, which is an incumbent to us, and then a second vendor, CCI Worldwide. This is for services not to exceed $60,000 per year, and we're asking for a 5-year agreement for these services. This is a budgeted expense, and we're recommending approval.
Okay, it's motion second by Ford and Frost. Any questions at all for this? Okay, nothing. Then roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Yes. Ford, yes.
Frost,
Yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes.
Okay, last one.
That's it?
Got one more.
Oh, you got one more.
Mill Creek.
Okay, well, okay, then let's just jump ahead real fast, do Mill Creek, if you don't mind, Julian, for just, you've been stuck for
If anybody has any questions, I'm here. So I don't,
You don't have anything?
I have
Oh,
a
okay.
report, but I don't, it's.
From you, I mean, really.
Can I do it?
Okay, Mill Creek, you want to do, let's see, resolution 22-05 authorizing extension of Mill Creek SSA concrete lifting and repair, moved by
Frost
Frost,
moves.
Davis.
second by Davist.
Okay.
Quickly.
This is just a concrete for the contract for the Mill Creek SSA. They do concrete lifting and sidewalk repair services. It's $16,400 annually. It's a 2-year agreement with 3 1-year renewals with Raise Right Concrete Lifting, and we're recommending approval for this budgeted expense.
Okay. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Frost, Gums,
Gums, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes.
Pass.
And then maybe in her last appointment here to report to us, Julie Mann, our PIO, Public Information Officer, has an update.
Just quickly, we continue to work really hard in the Public Information Office to get the information about what the county is doing out to the public. Between April 13th and May 10th, we reached 22,000 people on Facebook. So we're really building it up. The site has a lot of great stuff on it now. So we've reached out to all the communities in Kane County. We're now following them who have social media sites. They are now responding by sharing a lot of our information that we're putting out. So we're very proud of that. We continue to look at the website to try to update that. And the transition from Rick Nagel to our office for Kane County Connects continues.
Okay, great. That was fast. Gee, you don't want an hour? That's been standard procedure here in this meeting. Oh, Mr. Frost.
Just on that subject, I'd like to mention that Rick Nagel is leaving late this month, and after many years of taking King County Connects from 0 to a really high subscription rate. Anyways, I'm working with Madam Chairman's office to honor him at our next board meeting.
I think that's definitely appropriate. Mr. Nagel's provided a wealth of information, and that was one of the first things that I, even as a prospective board member before then, was notified that the King County Connects was available, and it was provided it was a very good link to keep track of items going on in the county and with the government. So, absolutely, let's do it. Okay, nothing on vehicles. Any new business?
Better not be.
Old business, discussion of 2-48. You received a copy of the original and a change on 2-48 for the administration committee. I think it's mostly we removed the PIO, or we didn't put in the PIO. They'll probably go to exec, right? The executive committee. And I think mostly just updated on the terminology.
Yes.
The instead of
central services
and microfilm, I think is the original. Is there any, having had a chance to at least look it over a little bit, is there any comments?
I like
Mr. Davis, it looks great, huh? Okay. Yeah. Oh, Mr. Fonstock, yes.
So just as a comment.
Actually, I should turn it over to you.
To mention it, the last person to hold the position of the Director of Central Services was Larry Briggs, and he passed away Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
So just to remember him and his service and work at the county. But he was the Director of Central Services, and that was probably 9 years ago, 10 years ago.
Been a while.
Still in the ordinance.
Yeah. There you go.
Roz moves to adjourn. Congratulations on beating the 12 o'clock hour.
Okay, we can do that. Okay, second.
Right here.
I'm so second.
He probably might have wanted the reports on file though, too.
Oh, reports on file. Oh, see,
That
see
was
how you messed me up?
implicit in the motion. I think.
Okay. May I have a motion to put the reports on file? Place reports on file.
Martin moves.
Martin.
Seconds.
Ford seconds. Roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Bras, Gums,
Gums, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes. No executive session required.
Move to adjourn.
Sorry, I got Froz and Gums
Nice. Okay.
for that. All in favor?
Aye.
First.
Aye.
Aye.